So there's this niche little anime called One Piece that I've been watching for about half a decade, and as of reading the 1130th chapter, I realized is kinda long. But despite its length, I had loyally stuck with it and planned to until the day it ends. I mean, hell, the only things I've consistently done for more than 2 weeks is eat, sleep, and breathe. What about One Piece makes me want to see it through to the end so bad? If you assume sunk cost fallacy has nothing to do with it, which it does, why is One Piece so good? Well, I'm a psychopath with too much free time on his hands, so let's go over all of One Piece to see what truly makes it one of a kind. We start the first chapter with narration expositing about a legendary pirate named Gold Roger, a minor character who probably won't be that important to the overarching story. Roger announces that he's left all his treasure somewhere in the world and tells everyone the first person to find it can have it, causing a massive surge in pirates and thusly birthing the Great Pirate Era. We then cut to our main protagonist Luffy. I'm just fucking with you, it's Luffy. In a convincing display of why you don't give knives to children, Luffy stabs himself in the face to prove himself worthy of joining a group of pirates run by none other than red-haired Shanks, yet another minor character who probably won't be that important to the overarching story. Luffy begs to join Shanks' crew, to which he's denied, with Shanks stating that Luffy can barely even swim. Luffy says it doesn't matter none if he's illiterate at swimming, as he can make up for it with his punches that are powerful as a pistol, which is totally not foreshadowing. Luffy then begins mauling at the thought of not being able to join Shanks' crew, and a few of his crewmates try to calm him down. The fat one, whose name is Lucky, tells Luffy pirates always have a good time, which is never disproven once throughout the entire manga. But just as the party is starting to get good, a man knocks down the door to the saloon. The man walks in, insulting the pirates and introducing himself as Higama, the leader of the mountain bandits. And gun to my head, I couldn't possibly tell you the name of this character without rereading. Anyway, Higama walks up to the bar and shatters a glass on Shanks' face before revealing his bounty of 8 million berries. Bounties essentially work as power levels in this universe, basically being a dick measuring contest where the bigger your bounty, the more well respected and stronger you are. In most cases. Shanks just kind of laughs off Higama's tough guy act and eventually gets him and his posse to leave by just not wanting to start any conflict, which really pisses Luffy off. Luffy demands to know why Shanks didn't fight back despite being disrespected, and Shanks just drops some wisdom on Luffy's ass by telling him that killing doesn't make him a man. But Luffy's way too hot-headed to listen to reason and storms out of the bar with Shanks grabbing his arm. But instead of pulling him back, Luffy's arm stretches instead, shocking everyone in the bar. Shanks' crew begins to freak out and asks Luffy if he ate that fruit they had stored in a box, to which Luffy says he did. It turns out that was no ordinary fruit, but rather the Gum Gum fruit, a devil fruit that turns Luffy's entire body into rubber. But of course, no power is without its downside. With having consumed the devil fruit, Luffy is no longer able to swim, which doesn't really bother him because he was pretty shit at swimming anyway. We jump into the near future where we see Shanks departing on another adventure, leaving Luffy all alone in the bar. As Luffy mopes over Shanks' pacifism, Higama bursts through the door with his group again, demanding to be served and talking shit about Shanks. Despite Luffy being upset with Shanks, Higama's smack talk still pisses Luffy off, and he challenges Higama to fight, and he's getting curb stomped. Yeah, it turns out that even with Luffy's newfound power, he's still in way over his head trying to fight an entire group of people on his own. But regardless of his dire situation, he still hurls insults at Higama, pissing him off to the point where he just decides he's gonna kill Luffy. But right before he does the dirty, Shanks shows up with his crew, straight up fucking publicly executing one of the bandits and dropping a hard-ass line about friendship, shonen style. As a quick side note, nobody ever dies in this series, so I'm sure that bandit was fine. After all, he was only shot directly in the head. Either way, Higama sees this as an act of war and sends his whole posse after Shanks, but before they can even reach him, Shanks' first mate has taken out every single bandit. This freaks Higama out, who swiftly escapes with Luffy as to not get his teeth kicked in. Higama steals a boat and brings Luffy out to sea, kicking him off the boat and leaving him to drown. It's also pretty funny how Luffy curses up a storm here, something you never really see him do the entire rest of the manga. Like, it's pretty funny just imagining Luffy calling Higama like a stupid dickhead while drowning. Either way, in a karmic twist of fate, stupid dickhead is eaten whole by a Sea King, but that's okay, he probably lived because once again, no one ever dies in One Piece. And just as the Sea King is about to eat Luffy, Shanks once again swoops in to save the day, stopping the Sea King from eating Luffy and staring at it with such intensity that it runs away, despite the fact it could have easily killed both of them. And yes, I know people will say, but he used Conqueror's Haki. And to that I say, womp womp, that won't be introduced for hundreds of chapters. Anyway, despite scaring the Sea King away, it's revealed that Shanks had lost his arm to it while rescuing Luffy, but he's pretty chilled and low-key about it, saying it's not really a big deal. From there, we see Shanks setting sail with no intention of coming back to the village. Luffy, having finally been humbled, realizes he's not cut out to sail with Shanks, but promises to get stronger and one day put together his own crew even better than Shanks's. Shanks gives Luffy his straw hat, claiming that one day when Luffy becomes a great pirate to return the hat to him. And with that, Shanks sails away, leaving Luffy with a memento and a dream. From there, we jump 10 years into the future, seeing a 17-year-old Luffy departing the village to begin his own life of piracy. For his first order of business, he decks the Sea King that non-lethally killed stupid dickhead with his attack aptly named Gum Gum Pistol. I guess his punches really were as strong as pistols. Luffy states he's gonna need a crew 10 men, something that'll only take him a brief 1,000 chapters to accomplish, but with his newfound determination, Luffy begins his voyage, screaming into the empty abyss of the ocean that he will become the king of the pirates. And just like that, Luffy's adventure begins and a multi-million-dollar enterprise is born. Chapter 2 starts with Luffy totally okay with dying after basically just setting sail, getting sucked into a whirlpool that would typically mean death for anyone, but for Luffy is a double death considering the minute he touches water, he basically becomes paralyzed. Before we could see the fate of our protagonist, we cut to the deck of a pirate ship where we're introduced to Koby, a boy who seems to be unwillingly on board the pirate ship of Iron Mace Alvida, a very beautiful pirate who enacts strict disciplinary measures on her crew. Koby finds a barrel of rum washed up and brings it back on board, giving it to a few of his crewmates to drink. But as they're about to open the barrel, Luffy bursts through the top, having survived the whirlpool by hiding in it. Alvida, not knowing Luffy's presence, swings her mace at all of them, sending them flying and giving a chance for Luffy and Koby to talk. Koby basically says his dumbass accidentally boarded Alvida's ship and was forced to work as a cabin boy or be put to death. He has spent 2 years aboard her ship and hates it, but is also too much of a pushover to quit. Luffy rightfully calls him clumsy and dumb and reveals that he wants to become king of the pirates, which makes Koby tweak out. Koby claims to become the king of the pirates, you must obtain the One Piece, the treasure left behind by Gold Roger, to which Luffy has one of his really first great character defining moments, telling Koby that he set himself on a path, and as long as he tries, even if he dies in the process, he could die happy. Koby, inspired by Luffy, states his goal of wanting to become a marine, but before he can hype himself up, Alvida comes in swinging. Koby finally grows a spine and stands up to Alvida, and before she can clobber him, Luffy uses his classic Gum Gum Pistol to deck that bitch into the next century. With Alvida defeated, Luffy and Koby take off on a dinghy, with Luffy having made up his mind on asking the legendary bounty hunter named Roronoa Zolo to join his crew, a character I totally didn't forget to mention up until now. So before I dive into this chapter, I'm going to quickly address the Zolo situation. I'll be referring to Zolo as Zoro because it sounds way better, and if you think otherwise, you're objectively wrong. From what I can find, Viz chose to go with Zolo for some kind of translation reason that I cannot even begin to fathom, but I think it's safe to say they made the wrong call. Anyway, we learn more about Zoro, a famous pirate hunter who's described as a demon in human form, which I guess is not inaccurate. Either way, Koby tweaks out about Zoro, but Luffy still plans on asking him to join his crew. They make it to Shell's Town, and Luffy basically beelines it to the marine base, jumping the wall and finding Zoro crucified in the courtyard. Zoro begs to be untied, but before Luffy can do anything, a little girl named Rika jumps into the courtyard to attempt to give Zoro some food. But before she gets the chance, Helmeppo appears, taking one of Rika's jelly donuts and trying it himself before spitting it out because they're way too sweet. Rika says she used sugar instead of salt, which angers Helmeppo and has him curb stomping some perfectly good food. As is protocol for every marine base across the world, if a little girl sneaks in, you must throw her over the wall as punishment, something Helmeppo is delighted to see. Unfortunately, however, Luffy breaks the marine code by catching Rika instead of letting her hit the ground. The children tossing has Luffy all angry for some reason, so he jumps the wall and talks to Zoro for a bit, with Zoro revealing his plan to remain crucified for a month with the reward being freedom if he can survive. Luffy is totally chill with that, and as he's walking away, Zoro asks Luffy to feed him the curb stomp jelly donuts as he hasn't eaten in days, a meal he ends up enjoying so much he gives his compliments to the chef. Luffy returns to Rika and tells her Zoro ate every bite, relieved that her 3-star Michelin meal was so highly rated. Rika tells Luffy of how Zoro was imprisoned, which as it turns out was because he saved her from a pack of Helmeppo's dogs. As Luffy and gang are sitting, Helmeppo happens to pass by, loudly talking about how he plans to execute Zoro and not stick to his promise of setting him free after a month, which gets Luffy all bent out of shape. Luffy, and say it with me now, decks Helmeppo for not keeping his promise, proving that all problems can be solved with violence.
I am great.
Helmeppo runs away to tell on Luffy to his daddy, but he's met with a classic case of domestic abuse because his father doesn't give a damn about him. This is our proper introduction to Axe Hand Morgan, the commander of the Marine base and a massive narcissist. Morgan throws a hissy fit when he finds out the little girl that snuck into the base was only thrown over the wall instead of killed, and performs another lovely act of friendship on one of his comrades by giving them brain damage. While this is going on, Luffy has decided Zoro is joining his crew, even if it isn't consensual, which is an uncomfortable sentence to say out loud. Luffy promises to bring Zoro his swords and help him out if he joins the crew, which he doesn't really have any choice in anyway. Luffy Gum Gum rockets himself up to the top of the Marine base, destroying a statue of Morgan in the process, to which Morgan immediately sicks the entirety of subordinates on for the heinous crime of destruction of property. Luffy takes Helmeppo as hostage and runs off to find Zoro's swords. In the meantime, Koby tries to free Zoro, but he just gets shot.
My name's Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm gonna be king of the pirates!
Koby brushes off the bullet like it was a mosquito bite and tells Zoro he's going to be executed despite the promise that was made, begging him to help Luffy fight the Marines. Luffy finally makes it to the room where Zoro's swords are being held. He sees 3 but aren't really sure which one's Zoro's, so he just takes them all. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, Zoro and Koby are about to be obliterated by a firing squad, but before we can see what happens, it's flashback time! In this flashback, we see a young Zoro losing in a sword duel to a girl named Kuina for the 2000th time in a row, causing him the baby rage. Later that day, he challenges Kuina to a duel with real swords, which she accepts and wipes the floor with him in seconds. Zoro is frustrated by his 2001st loss, but Kuina says she's the one who should be frustrated because she's a girl, and we all know that boys is stronger than grills. Kuina says she can't become a great swordsman because girls become weaker with age, and her father agrees with that, really making him father of the year material. Zoro disagrees with this sentiment, however, getting frustrated at Kuina's frustration and saying that can't be true as she's beaten him thousands of times, stating right there and then that he swears to beat her through his own merits rather than with the help of natural forces like age. And right there and then, Zoro and Kuina promise to compete against each other to become the greatest swordsman or woman in the world. This, however, ends in tragedy when Zoro awakens the next day to find out Kuina had been killed by fall down D stairs. Wow, sorry, that joke was in really poor taste. It turns out that Kuina had fallen down the stairs and died, leaving Zoro destroyed. He promises to become the greatest swordsman in the world, not only for his sake, but Kuina's now as well. He also inherits her sword, the Wado Ichimonji, a weapon we will learn more about in also about 1,000 chapters from now. We cut back into the present and see Luffy dive right in front of the firing squad, taking all the bullets and bouncing them back. Luffy should thank the lords there's no 50 cal bullets in One Piece because he would not be bouncing those back. Luffy gives Zoro his swords, to which he reveals he is a practitioner of the 3 sword style. And yes, when I first heard that, I also thought he held the 3rd sword in between his ass cheeks, but I was unfortunately mistaken. With Zoro being trapped between Luffy and a firing squad, he decides to pick the lesser of the 2 evils and sides with Luffy, agreeing to join his crew.
It was his hat, Mr. Krabs! He was number 1!
Luffy unties Zoro just in time, and Zoro manages to catch all of the Marine swords, revealing that he kept the 3rd sword in his mouth, much to my dismay. Zoro tells Luffy his ambition and says if he's forced to abandon this ambition to be a pirate, he would force Luffy to kill himself. But Luffy doesn't really have a problem with this, claiming that there would be no one better fit to be by the side of the king of the pirates than the greatest swordsman in the world. Luffy shows why he's the king of AoEs by sideswiping an entire battalion of Marines, and we get this panel which isn't important but I thought went hard as fuck. Luffy and Morgan scuffle for a bit before Helmeppo holds Koby at gunpoint, demanding they stop what they're doing. Luffy, completely unfazed by this, once again decks Helmeppo before he can pull the trigger, while Zoro goes in for the finishing blow on Morgan, slashing him and ending the fight. All in all, pretty good fight.
All hands, salute!
Instead of capturing Luffy and Zoro for what they did, the Marines rejoice as Morgan's reign of terror had been put to an end. One thing I'd like to do before we continue is a brief analysis of Morgan as a villain. There isn't really a whole lot to him as he's the first major antagonist and barely gets any screen time, but even with that, I feel like he deserves something at least. The thing that caught my attention about him the most is the possible mirror between him and Luffy. In chapter 4, he claims to be better than everyone else due to his status, and while I could be reading way too far into this, I can kind of see a connection between Morgan and Luffy when it comes to status. Both of them are essentially the captains of their respective crews, but where they differ is in how they treat those crew members. Morgan ruled through fear and made everyone out to be lesser than him, which caused his own downfall, having his men fear him rather than respect him. This ultimately would lead him to being arrested arrested and his rank stripped away after he was defeated, with all of his men even celebrating when he fell. This is a stark contrast to how we see Luffy treat his crew members throughout the story, treating them as equals despite being the captain of his crew, and even giving crew members who've defected respect despite their traitorous behavior. This is all to say that because Luffy leads through a system of respect rather than fear, his crew is willing to back him up come hell or high water, a sentiment Morgan could never foster through his less than stellar leadership skills. But enough about the power of friendship, let's finish up this arc. Zoro asks Luffy what's next, which he excitedly answers the Grand Line, but before they can make up their mind, Kobe jumps in saying that's basically suicide. They are then interrupted by the Marines, who are forced to kick Luffy and Zoro out for being pirates despite what they did for the island. Luffy and Zoro go to leave, and one of the Marines asks if Kobe's gonna go with them. Kobe, wanting to become a Marine, can't be associated with pirates, which is problematic considering he basically helped them out the entire arc. Luffy, knowing that just as well, begins to antagonize Kobe by revealing his past working aboard a pirate ship, which causes Kobe to punch Luffy to shut him up. The two begin to fight before being separated by the Marines, being convinced they aren't friendly with each other and demanding Luffy leave. Kobe, realizing Luffy had done that to ensure that he wouldn't be lumped in with the two of them, jumps on the opportunity to ask to join the Marines, to which he's accepted. The Marines salute Luffy and Zoro as they set sail, and act against Marine regulations that's punished with 1 week of no dinner. And with that, Luffy and crew set out for the Grand Line, ending the first arc of One Piece. Alright, I just thought of this idea while I was writing the script, but I guess I might as well rank all the arcs as I cover them, because why would I not? And with all things considered, I'm going to give this an A rank. While it's short and it's hard to judge, especially when comparing it to some larger arcs later down the line, I think this is a really solid start that has some good characterization and introduces a ton of characters, most of which will reappear in the story at some point. But with all of that said, that wraps up the Romance Dawn arc, and next up we have Orange Town, being about twice the length and introducing a bunch of really important characters. It's going to be an interesting one to cover. But until then, have a good one and hope to see you soon.